Good day. Doom is straightforward and iconic. Doom changed the entire entertainment medium of gaming forever. Doom is one of my favorite games of all time, and Doom is still just as relevant today as it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I was a child, and I was introduced to Doom by my grandfather. When he first brought it up, I thought it was some kind of side-scrolling RPG of some description. When that fateful day came, and he brought those shareware discs home, well, my life changed forever.
Doom was developed and published by the masters of gaming, the masters of the first-person shooter, the masters of Doom, id Software, in the holy year of 1993, and on the holy day of December 10th. Doom is a first-person shooter, and like its predecessor Wolfenstein 3D, it is broken into episodes. The first episode was the shareware version, and it was knee-deep in the dead. The other two were the registered episodes, Shores of Hell and Inferno. We had to have gotten the registered version at some point in the 90s, as I remember playing the crap out of Shores of Hell. Doom would fully popularize the first-person shooter as a genre. Wolfenstein 3D started it, but it was lacking in a few areas. There was a lack of weapon and enemy variety, along with repetitive levels. Doom changed everything. What you are looking at here is Doom on DOSBox. The game still looks pretty good without any modern enhancements or quality of life updates. If it looks this good today, 30 years in the future, you can only but imagine what kids like me thought about it back in the day. There was literally nothing that looked or played like it. It, overnight, made all the Wolfenstein 3D clones hopelessly obsolete. This one game was by far id's most groundbreaking work, and nothing since has changed the genre and medium to the extent that this game has. So what did it do? There are several obvious things Doom does. It's got better graphics, better and more numerous guns, huge enemy variety, and super complex levels. All of those things are great, but those are not what made Doom the titan of gaming that it is. When you see a first-person shooter, you probably think they're all alike. You blast a bastard with a shotty, rinse, repeat, rock off with the devil, the end. What it did was make the game really bloody satisfying and visceral. Wolfenstein was alright, you shot Nazis, but they took a few hits to bring down, and the damage system was kinda wonky, and favored methodical gameplay. Id, in Doom, lived up to its very name. The gameplay here is much faster, and the damage system is very different. It is no longer dependent on how close you are to the enemy, meaning you can potentially tank a whole bunch of shots. The shotgun has got to be the single greatest weapon in all of Doom, and probably the single greatest weapon in all of first-person shooting, or at least the weapon that every other first-person shooter weapon must pay homage to. This one weapon allowed Doom to be different from all the other first-person shooters. In Wolfenstein 3D and many of the Wolfenstein 3D clones, you would have to shoot enemies a lot to finally put them down. The 12-gauge shotty could one-shot many enemies, and this allowed you to just fly through the levels, shooting bastards to your heart's content. I love this weapon so much that I included it in the very first fanfiction I ever wrote when I was like sub 10 years old. In that fanfic, one of my major characters had the Doom shotgun, but apparently one shell wasn't enough to put down a bastard, and then that bastard was shot with the 99-round machine gun from Wolfenstein 3D. Combined with the smooth movement and fast-paced gameplay, this gave you a game that tickled the id and got you sucked into a world of endless non-stop action. No game could even dream of doing this in the early 90s, and even though I've played this game since the beginning, I found myself getting sucked in like it was the first time I ever played the game. The rest of the gameplay is what would become and stay industry standard. Kill all bad guys and collect a number of keys and get to the exit. It's a type of gameplay that, while simple, cuts all the crap and gives you all the monster-slaying fun you could ever bloody well want. So now, we're going to start rolling in some footage from what is called a source port. Doom was so popular that people from day one started modding the game, and eventually wanted to easily play it on modern computers, and thus fans created what is called a source port. We will go into greater detail on the concept of the source port later, but all you need to know now is that with the source port, you are no longer limited to the original disk operating system or DOS box. And with the GZ Doom source port, you can run the game at higher screen resolutions, play with modern controls, and a bunch of other little improvements. What's awesome is that these improvements do not change the base game, and instead simply make the base game that much more easy to play. That's the power of Doom. The guns in this game are pretty bloody awesome. You start the game with a Beretta 92, but then immediately get a 12-gauge shotgun for close encounters, and this will be your best friend in the game. I believe the shotgun is based upon an Ithaca of some description. You then get your chain gun for clearing out huge waves of monster madness of the assholest variety. You then got your rocket launcher, and you can splash damage yourself, so be careful not to be too close to the enemy when letting one off. And then there's the phased plasma pulse rifle in the 40-watt range, and it's good on any and all enemies from the little foot soldier bastards to the big badasses. And finally, you got the big boy, the one that all ultimate weapons pay homage to, the BFG 9000, the Bioforce gun, or as it's more colloquially known, the big fucking gun. Didn't believe it? It's the ultimate weapon and is quite good and turns me on in more ways than one. It's good for taking out rooms of enemies or the big bosses. You also get a chainsaw, which I never really used much in the 90s and even today. It kind of just sits in the inventory, unloved and unused. You get a few power-ups in the game, such as invisibility and infrared goggles. Finally, you get the Berserk power-up. This powers up your fists and makes them as powerful as the rockets. However, you can still get shredded pretty fast. The enemies that wanted to shred you in the worst way were numerous as they were varied. You got your standard zombie soldaten, they are armed with either a carbine or a shotgun. You got imps, you got pinky demons, and those were on the right side of Bullet Sponge. Caco demons that fly around like little bastards and blast you from a distance, and you got your bosses like the one-hit kill cyber demons, and the less cheap Barons of Hell. These enemies gave players, including me, a devil of a time back in the day, and funny enough, people will often say that base Doom on the easier difficulties is hard. Oh, just wait till you try Nightmare. You see, Doom had your typical easy, medium, and hard difficulties, and as a child, I played the game on easy, and sometimes used the cheat, IDDQD, on the harder areas. But if you wanted a real challenge, you played the game on Nightmare. The game even tells you that it's not even remotely fair, and it still is kind of fair. It's just that the enemies keep respawning. I did the Doom Nightmare Challenge as the very first of a series of Doom Let's Plays way back in 2010. The 3 original episodes were some of the best Doom levels of all time. Knee Deep in the Dead was the shareware episode, but it's my favorite by far, and that's not because it's the first Doom I ever played either. Instead, it's due to the fast-paced nature of each level, and it's just so short and so sweet, and you're always on the hunt for more blood. Shores of Hell was my favorite as a kid, because on lower difficulties, you could find a shotgun in 2 seconds. It's not quite as fast-paced as the preceding episode, and it's quite a bit more difficult. This is the episode where you can finally get the plasma rifle and the BFG 9000. Lastly, there's Inferno. It was my least favorite as a kid and today. It's way harder and the levels get confusing, and I never liked the Hell levels anyway, as I felt the art style was not quite as nice as the tech-based one. You finally have Thy Flesh Consumed. Throughout the entirety of the 90s and the early 2000s, I had never even heard of this episode, and when I finally played it, it basically took everything I hated about Inferno and kicked up that frustration by about 20 notches. It's rock bloody hard, and the levels are pretty convoluted. I don't think I missed much. But if you like a challenge, it's worth playing. In '93, these graphics were beyond next gen. Just look at how well detailed everything is. The weapons, the enemies, and every bloody texture used in these levels. Everything is detailed to a point that was just unthinkable a few years prior to 1993. This is a 2.5D first-person shooter, but damn did these sprites look absolutely amazing. Like in Wolfenstein 3D, you cannot look up or down, but unlike in Wolf 3D, enemies are not all on the same plane, and the multi-layer levels were a thing of beauty both then and now, and the difference between this game and Wolf 3D was night and bloody day, and any game that couldn't do this was relegated to the bargain bin. The original shareware release was kind of funny in that you couldn't get 200 of anything due to engine limitations. It would only be later that you could do so. And Doom featured a bunch of revisions, and fans have done more so still. Original screen resolution for Doom was 640 by 480, and now with modern source ports you can get up to 8K, and the game just looks amazing in 2K to say the very least. And you can have 200 of everything. Controls for the original game were your usual arrow keys and control keys, but they worked. and still work well enough today, but I much prefer the standard controller as it's much less brutal on my tender fingers. Sound and music were also game-changing. No game sounded as good as this one, and no game had a soundtrack this rockin'. Funny enough, I played this with PC speaker at first, but so awesome was the sounds and beats of Doom that I didn't complain about this new sound when we finally got a good sound card. The guns are a feast for the ears, and the enemies sound distinct and scary, and there are even spooky sounds in the background. Yeah, in the 90s, Doom was really spooky, and this was kind of offset though by the super rocking soundtrack. This is pretty much one of the best soundtracks of all time, and to this day, the fans are still making fan remixes of them, and you can find endless covers of E1M1. The tracks themselves were inspired by the epic music of the time, and featured music based upon songs from a variety of bands, ranging from Metallica to Believer. The Doom soundtrack was, and is, one of the best of all time, and is fit to be seated next to Dave Wise's Donkey Kong Country and Koji Kondo's Super Mario soundtracks. Despite listening to them for decades, I still listen to these tracks when I work out. Doom, with all of its satanic imagery, angered the proto-cancel culture of its day, and many fools labeled this game as pro-Satan, when in fact this game is one of the most Christian games ever made. You are a righteous Catholic man taking on the hordes of hell. Can't get much more Christian than that, ladies and gentlemen. In the game, you play as one doomed space marine. The name of this one doomed space marine changes a bit, but the accepted fan name is Doom Guy. The name can also be Flynn Taggart or Buddy Decote, with Decote being dies at the end of episode. Whatever the hell your name is, you're a Marine sent to the Martian moon of Phobos to answer a distress call from the Wayland-Yutani-inspired megacorp, Union Aerospace. The UAC turned on some alien teleporters, and the hordes of hell came pouring out. Your squad gets wiped out, and you gotta be a one-man crusade to take down the hordes of hell once and for all! Doom Guy himself gets a little character, but that's only found in the instruction manual for the game. He is in trouble for punching his superior officer because said superior officer wanted to blast some civvies in a war zone. This little bit of character lets you, the player, know that Doom Guy is a good guy and does not kill because he loves it like some kind of coronate berserker, but instead because he is a good man fighting for the souls of humanity. This story would inspire countless ripoffs, and Doom Guy would be the standard protagonist for first-person shooters for decades to come. The story would get major expansion in the 4 Doom novels, and hell yeah, I read them! The first novel, Knee Deep in the Dead, gives him a human partner to play off of. She was named Arlene Sanders, aka Doom Girl, and the novel follows pretty close with the game, except for one little bitty tiny whiny detail. It makes the enemies aliens. I guess the spawn of Stan went too far or something. The rest of the books cover Doom 2 and then go off the rails entirely, and for whatever reason become hard science fiction. I still love them, even if they are weird as all hell. In 2005, there would be a Doom movie starring The Rock and pre-fame Carl Urban. It was absolutely atrociously bad, and yet some find it to be a guilty pleasure. The reason I hate it so much is it's not so much a Doom movie, but instead just a Resident Evil ripoff. Instead of aliens or demons, it's now just a virus, really? There is a first-person shooter scene at the end of the movie, which people seem to like for some reason, but that most assuredly does not make up for the rest of the movie's crap quality. There would be another movie released in 2019, and that movie was slightly better, but instead of a Doom Guy, there was a Doom Girl that, while having more personality than Captain Marvel, still wasn't what one would generally consider Doom Guy level, and was more based upon Doom 3. In its day, the meme of "does it play Doom" was taken very seriously. If you could get a system to play Doom, you had a license to print money. Every console in the 90s had a port, even the Super Nintendo, and that port, well, not great, at least existed, I guess, and if all you had was a Super Nintendo, it was better than nothing. Doom served the great techno demon William Gates and helped proliferate Windows 95. Yes, Doom was that big that it helped push the Primarch progenitor of the modern-day operating system. There was even a commercial with the unholy William Gates green-screened into the game. even in the early 2000s, Doom was still popular, and there was a GBA port made, and holy crap, was it good? GBA Doom was a major improvement over the Super Nintendo one and approached the original graphics in terms of quality. The sound was crackly and crappy, but man, did it play good. I had this for my GBA SP back in the day and played the crap out of it. Modding. Modding Doom was super easy, and numerous Doom mods called WODs, for Where Is All the Data, were created from literally day bloody one. I personally only played a few in the 90s, as I didn't get the internet until the early 2000s. However, there was a solution for people who didn't have internet in the 90s. Companies back then would compile WODs and sell them on compact discs, and I had one of those discs back in the 90s, and half the WODs either didn't work, and the one that did work wasn't really any good, and that was a Hexen WOD. But whatever, in 2008, when I got back into the games of my childhood, Doom was at the top of the list, and I played the crap out of it on DOSBox. And then one day, I wanted to see if I could put it on my Nintendo DS, and it was due to this desire that I inadvertently discovered Doom modding. Yes, I got into modding Doom by wanting to play it on the Nintendo DS. And just so you know, it works well on there, and I played the crap out of it on there too. I discovered Z-Doom when trying to find DS Doom. Z-Doom is a source port. Basically what it does is it allows you to play Doom on a modern PC with higher screen resolutions, modern controls, and allows easy modding of the game. Source ports would also remove many of the limitations of the original engine. Most notably, Z-Doom and later GZ-Doom would allow for modders to create levels with slopes. I would eventually move on from Z-Doom to Zandronum, and Zandronum itself would later be renamed Skulltag, and Z-Doom itself would later give way to GZ-Doom. Now, Doom modding would remain decently popular since the 90s, and many level packs would be released, weapon mods would be made, all kinds of cool stuff like that. But it was always just kind of in the background. If you knew, you knew. But Doom modding would hit the mainstream when the man, the myth, the Sergeant Mark IV, he would blast onto the scene in 2010 with Brutal Doom. This changed Doom modding forever. And the mod itself was pretty great because it made your shots much more accurate and introduced ultra-violence with massive blood fountains. This mod made Doom go from a venerable classic that was still beloved to something current, to something that could compete with then modern games. I was personally turned on to this mod by my awesome fans, and I finally played it in 2012 and never looked back. Thanks to this mod, Doom is as popular as it has ever bloody well been, and numerous forks of Brutal Doom have been created, with Project Brutality being by far my favorite. Doom is still being modded in 2023, and some paid games are being put out on Steam using GZ Doom. Doom will never die because it really is that good, and despite being 30 years old, it is still evolving and growing. Doom would receive a few direct sequels. Doom 2 would change the engine a little bit, add a new weapon, and some new enemies. Doom 3 would be sort of a continuity reboot. This was the first 3D Doom, and is my favorite Doom game of all time. Doom would also receive some modern day iterations. Doom 2016 would bring in the Doom Slayer, and make Doom Guy a superhero. This gameplay was pretty good, and it introduced the concept of the glory kill, where you could shoot an enemy and then beat him up for health and ammo. Doom Eternal would be released in 2020 and would garner a great deal of popularity, although I don't really like that game very much because it's more glory kill than shooting. And Doom Eternal itself would receive 2 expansions, Doom the Ancient Gods Part 1 and Doom the Ancient Gods Part 2, and Ancient Gods Part 2 would conclude the Doom story.
From the old disk operating system to Windows 11, Doom will be with us for 30 more years, and I cannot wait to see what the fans will cook up next. And so, I'm GeneralLotz, wishing you good, Dark Forces, and good Dark Forces 2, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and please consider leaving a like or a comment, as the algorithm desires your soul. And I want to thank all those fans who have supported this channel, both past and present.